Today, we want to finish with a conversation about the soft feelings from the startup ecosystem in the region, in particular with Seoul. And so we have the pleasure to have the founder of Seoul Startups, Marta Allina.
Nice to meet you, Marco. And it's a pleasure to be here today and share some of the interesting insights about the startup ecosystem and the startup community at large.
And first, maybe actually some fresh feelings about how we have experienced and seen the energy of the startup community here. I have to say, today this is the opening of one of many conferences about startups and open innovations in general, and it's amazing both the size and the amount of activities that have been organized. So it's really commendable, as opposed to seeing. I can't even think of any other countries where there is so much and in such a concentrated format in terms of exposure to startups.
Well, for sure, in Korea, I would say most of the ecosystem players are very engaged in growing the startup scene, in curating startups, and investing into the startup scene. And what you saw today is just one of the examples of the efforts that are being made every single day to grow and curate the scene. We've been listening to all the statistical data about the investments. That's also very much driven by not only the private side, but also I would say the national authorities that want to kind of help the ecosystem grow and in turn help the country's GDP improve and have the economy on the same level as it was a few decades ago when Korea was called the Tiger of Asia.
Right. And it's interesting because it's I don't think it's been mentioned today, but Korea is one of the few economies in the world where I know for sure that the creation of unicorns is one of the top priorities from governments to come. Also changing government, but still the topic of unicorns is still there.
Yes, indeed. In fact, the term unicorn is, I would say, used very often. Not only the term unicorn, there's a new project that recently got launched for baby K unicorns, and that's for companies' future scale-ups that are promising enough to get special attention from government authorities. So yes, unicorn everything pretty much here in Korea. I would even say maybe a little bit too much.
Yeah. We talk about this indigestion probably of activities and opportunities for startups in a second. But maybe let's start from you here. Actually,
Yes.
You have a very interesting and international background. What took you to South Korea in the first place?
Okay, so I am, as you can see, probably I'm not Korean. I'm originally from Poland, but I have spent probably at this point half of my life in Korea, both as a child and later on as a young adult and now a much older adult. I'm originally from Poland. I came here this time around to do my graduate school studies. I graduated and worked for a couple of years for one of the biggest corporations.
You can say the name, it's Samsung.
Yes, it's Samsung. I'm never too sure about it, but yes, it's Samsung. In fact, to be even more precise, I worked in networks business. So I was behind all the first LTE commercial launch here in Korea and the development of 5G networks. So very exciting. But I decided to move on and progress gradually into the startup scene, having worked in accelerators with government institutions for government projects for startups themselves. And somewhere along the way, I realized that as much as Korean startup ecosystem is very vibrant and very exciting, there is one thing that it's lacking, and that is community, that glue that connects all the ecosystem players and allows them to form networks between each other. And out of that need came Seoul Startups. And so since 2017, when Seoul Startups was first launched, I have been an ecosystem player, an ecosystem builder, and a community builder here in Korea.
So what's the size of your membership today?
So Seoul Startups, we have currently 2,400 members and growing. We have had this year quite an impressive spring in growth, and hopefully that's not the end of it. But we also have numerous partners in the ecosystem, including government institutions, NGOs, startups, accelerators, and VCs. We kind of want to build that bridge between them, but also between entrepreneurs, because I personally believe that really in the middle of the ecosystem, the focus of any ecosystem should be entrepreneurs and startups.
And what is the very scope? I mean, the creation of a community, obviously, I think is a pretty clear boundaries, but is the sharing of best practices, experiencing the mentoring among the different startuppers and founders one of the main scope of the activities of Seoul Startup?
Yes, it is. So originally on the Korean startup scene, startup mentoring and kind of helping each other out, supporting each other was kind of a no-go, mostly because there was no infrastructure for older and more experienced entrepreneurs to help the younger ones.
So back to the role of mentorship. It was interesting because today before our panel, we saw a panel from Los Altos Ventures on really the different stages of entrepreneurship with the startups that started here in the 90s, and then how that first generation, there was, the first digital generation then graduated with the ability to create the tech giants that you see today. How important is the speed at which things are happening? Because it's we are comparing with probably the largest ecosystem of startups in the world, that is in Silicon Valley. We still need a lot of that gathering, whether it's through an organization or informally, because is the one way how companies keep passing information that otherwise will be missed in an environment where everything is changing so fast that if you don't explicitly dedicate some time to gather, you'll miss opportunities, whether it's through transactions or to the new waves of technologies and opportunities. How is that important in Korea, where things are not at the same pace?
Well, as you mentioned, Korea is very fast-paced, and I would even go back beyond the 90s, like all modern history, especially when it comes to the economic growth in Korea, was always very, very fast-paced. You have to remember that just not long ago in the 1950s, Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world, and look at it now. And so, everything is fast-paced, but that also means that some things get omitted along the way. And that's one of the things, gathering and sharing knowledge, that soft skill, I guess, of communicating and building that rapport within the community somehow got lost along the way. There is many reasons for that. One of them I would point out is the government integration in the startup ecosystem. And on one hand, it's amazing, like this event being a true example of how awesome government support can be. And it's great that there's so many grants for startups, but there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And if startups get too easy access from government without having really being vetted by the community, by other startups, but more experienced entrepreneurs, that equals a lot of trouble and a lot of abuse of those privileges. So I would say that is one of the main issues currently that the Korean startup ecosystem is experiencing. The good thing is, I think more and more people are aware of that, and more is being done to mitigate that. And that's why also us, Seoul Startups, is getting so much recognition currently by different institutions and organizations.
Yeah, that topic of government support, government interventions is always a double-edged sword, right?
It is.
There's definitely the positive side, as you're saying. As an operator in this market for a few years, we are facing today when you interact with startups, in particular the ones that are a little bit more mature, that sense that they are overwhelmed by free lunches. And so
so much. And I mean, overwhelmed, but also unfortunately, there's a lot of examples of abusing those free lunches. Like even here in, well, I mean, I mostly can tell from the Korean experience, there are startups that go for years and years without actually having a product, without actual sales, without actual traction, but just applying from one grant to another, from one program to another, and surviving for years. And once they're run out of programs, they report bankruptcy and they just re-register under a different name. So and go through the same process all over again. So it's a little bit discouraging, especially for those who actually come with a product and an idea and really want to make a change and a splash in the ecosystem, because guys like that who can write a good grant application kind of steal the win from them.
Yeah, but on a positive note, I have to say again, as operators that we've been interacting with that ecosystem on a constant basis, that two things: that the quality of technologies coming out of here is definitely improving dramatically, and the international exposure, I think that will put that on the higher list, is becoming more and more natural. So we're facing and dealing with startups that start with a global perspective from the beginning, rather than as a after the fact factor. And I think the ability now and finally to attract entrepreneurs that are coming from different markets is something that is changing really the ecosystem per se, right?
Right.
The international audience that this is creating.
So there's two sides of every story, I suppose. With the startups being more ready for global exposure and being ready to go global, this is a recent thing. So the Korean government had been pushing startups to go global for ages. Like there's been global programs forever and ever, but the startups were never ready or mature enough to make that step. And I would say the last year and a half, 2 years is when we see an emergence of entrepreneurs and startups, or even early stage startups that are global from day one. And it's also dictated by the fact that it's the new generation of entrepreneurs, younger entrepreneurs who have already lived abroad, had global exposure, and they know that Korean market, it's a small market at the end of the day. So if you really want to make a splash and really make something meaningful, you have to look global from day one. So that's one thing. When it comes to attracting foreign startups into Korea, I think there is a bit of a discord between various government institutions. So on one hand, the government wants to bring in foreign startups and foreign investors into the country, but at the same time, it's still struggling with facilitating with the infrastructure to making a real international startup hub here. And I'm talking about very basic things like visas, business registration, access to the network. So I want to say that since this is the beginning, things will get better, and I really hope they will. And certainly organizations like mine will be working to help that and make that happen. But it's still something that authorities should have in mind if they really want to turn Korea into a global startup hub.
A great point. I think is an action for policymakers, right?
Yeah.
If they want to follow through what they hope to create, that is a hub for global startups.
I would say they have to start communicating between each other.
Yeah,
that would be a good start.
All right. I want to finish with your perspective of unique opportunities that can come from South Korea, both as potential startups and a few areas where you think that the ecosystem is more developed than in other geographies. What would you consider?
I am very excited currently in Korea about several sectors. One is bio and healthcare, and that's been on the rise here in Korea even before COVID. Everybody thinks that COVID kind of kicked that off. No, Korea had been very much into the area for some time, and there's some exciting startups. And when you look at weekly investments, it's really a sector that really it's currently from investors. Another one is something that's also very hyped right now, the social impact scene. All corporates are about ESG currently. Yeah. And although they might not fully understand what ESG is, it's really great that finally there's attention put into developing the impact scene and addressing sustainable development goals. And Korea has some very exciting accelerator programs and startups in that region. In fact, the whole New Deal that the government announced last year includes the Green Deal, which is focused exactly on that, on finding technologies and innovation to address sustainability issues. So that's something I would definitely look at. And last but not least, something that maybe people tend to not fully address as startups, local content creators. They're very big, especially in rural parts of Korea, because they cooperate usually with local farmers, producers, manufacturers to create content and kind of bring the hype back to those regions and also help them get in touch with the more digitalized world. So I would certainly be excited about those three
That's
sectors.
Very interesting to know. I didn't know about the latter one. Just to finish, you mentioned impact and sustainability. Yes. Your other hat is with the Impact Collective Accelerator.
Indeed,
just
it is.
Give a little pitch about that and what can offer for startups here.
Yes, so Impact Collective is a 100% virtual investment and acceleration program focused around the social impact in Asia Pacific region. It's mostly run out of Korea, but not only. Our team members are pretty much scattered around the region, and we work with local partners in 4 cities: in Singapore, in Vietnam, I'm going to skip it, obviously in Seoul, and last but not least, in Malaysia.
On the website, Adam. Give the website so people can actually double check.
So double check at impactcollective.earth. It's a really exciting program because we focus on helping startups who are profitable, who have a profitable model, but are not really aligned with their impact goals to find those SDG goals that their business can really solve. And on the other hand, we help impact startups who really know what their impact is, but are not really sure how to be profitable out of that to find their money streams. And it's very exciting. We'll be choosing 50 startups this year. And
would that be the first batch, or?
That will be the second batch. Our first batch was last year. Very exciting. We had 84 startups. Wow. From all around the world, literally from every continent. And 10 of them, over 10 of them got investment from our fund.
Interesting. So there is a fund.
There is a fund. There's an Impact Collective fund as well, with some very exciting partners. So if you're in the impact scene, definitely worth checking it out.
Great. I think that's a perfect ending. Marta, thanks for your input and thanks for what you've been doing for the ecosystem of startups.
I'll try to do more.
Yeah, and there's definitely more to come. And I think with this, that's the end of our first day of Scaleup Summit in South Korea. There's more to come. Follow our website for all the next sessions. Thank you very much. Bye.